tonight. Uncomfortably smoky. Air quality affected by wildfires in Alberta is pushing people in Saskatchewan indoors. Also, after settling with Brandt Properties, the government of Saskatchewan says it will help CNIB find a new home. Plus, on the heels of a massively successful novel, Saskatchewan author Michelle Good sits down to talk about her new book of essays called Truth Telling.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Friday, July 14th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening and thank you for watching. If you've been outside today, chances are you noticed a sky full of smoke. It's blanketing many parts of the province and creating a potentially dangerous situation for many people who have to breathe it in. Alexander Kwan takes a look at what repeated exposure to wildfire smoke means for your health.
And I was coughing a little bit this morning, and it's definitely from this poor air.
A plume of heavy smoke from forest fires has descended on Saskatchewan. Conditions in Regina, Swift Current, Estevan, and Saskatoon rated 10 plus or very high risk on the federal government's Air Quality Health Index. And it's not just harming people with pre-existing health conditions or who are very young or very old. When the air gets this polluted, everyone is at risk.
You know, we were out for a stroll and we felt that we needed to sit because of just, it's harder to breathe for sure.
Even the Saskatchewan Rough Riders chose to practice indoors rather than here at Mosaic Stadium. According to an expert that studies the effects of pollution and fires on lung health, the early data points to wildfire smoke posing a significant risk to all of us.
It's got all of the organisms that are in the forest. It's got all of the plants and pollens. It's got the microbes of a whole range of different kinds. And furthermore, when these fires approach a city or any town, really anything with man-made structures, then you start burning paint and plastics and metal. And that entire mixture is almost certainly more toxic than just the wood alone.
Repeated exposure to wildfire smoke could result in significant health problems.
If you have repeated irritation to your skin, eventually you're going to have scarring. And most people actually can understand that from experience. So the same thing can happen in the lung, and that's why we're worried about long-term exposures.
Environment and Climate Change Canada, as well as experts like Carlston, say it's better to avoid exposure to wildfire smoke. That means staying indoors and avoiding strenuous activity. If you have to go outside, wear a high-quality mask like an N95 to ensure particles don't get into your airways. Alexander Kwan, CBC News, Regina.
And for more on what's going on in the sky, our weather specialist Ethan Williams joins me now.
Well, it's this low pressure system here, Sam, that's responsible for bringing the smoke. It's off the coast of Hudson Bay in northern Manitoba, and generally the flow around an area of low pressure is counterclockwise, so the wind's going kind of in this motion here. But this area of winds around this low pressure system is quite wide, and so the winds are expanding into the Northern Territories and coming down the other side in northeastern Alberta, where we are seeing intense forest fire smoke there from forest fires in that province. As that flow moves southeastward, it drags that smoke into our province. And on top of that, in the upper levels of the atmosphere, we also have the jet stream moving through, which is pulling down higher levels of smoke as well. So we have smoke at the surface and smoke above in addition. And now, as quickly as the smoke has come, it is leaving as well. And in fact, in places like Saskatoon and Prince Albert and much of central and northern Saskatchewan, we are starting to see those air quality advisories drop off. How much longer is it going to be in effect for southern Saskatchewan, Sam? I'll let you know a little bit later.
All right. Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
The federal government is giving the province $1.7 million for its chronic pain clinic program. The program helps people either addicted to opioids or at risk of addiction because of pain management. The Regina Chronic Pain Clinic started in 2019 with a similar cash injection from the feds. That clinic is now provincially funded through the Saskatchewan Health Authority. The clinic provides patients safer opioid prescribing practices for pain management, as well as methadone, counseling, and exercise therapy. This new money will help expand consultation services in Regina and smaller communities.
A very typical patient would be someone who's been using it, say, for at least over 5, sometimes over 10 years. We've got patients who've been using opioids for more than even 30 years. They started in late 80s, early 90s, because that was the time when it was misunderstood. However, it's not the patient's fault. It's the drug that kind of acts and messes up their brain and the central system.
This is a journey. This is a journey that the health system is going on, and it's a long journey, and it's a complex one. And that we do want to provide patients better services and supports for management of their pain conditions, and in particular in the as least interventive as possible.
Experts say these days doctors are more cautious about prescribing opioids, and they say more needs to be done to get patients free services to help them manage their pain safely. Premier Scott Moe says the provincial government will work to find a new home for the Canadian National Institute for the Blind in Regina. Yesterday, Moe was asked about the government settling a lawsuit with Brandt Properties for a total of more than $11.6 million. Brandt had filed a lawsuit last year seeking damages from the government after its project to build 77,000 square foot office building in Regina stalled, and some of that space was supposed to be used by the CNIB. The proposed project was on the site of CNIB's original building on the edge of the park on Broad Street. Moe says while the CNIB will not be able to build at its former location, the government will help with a permanent home.
There won't be a building in that location in the park. And I would say is that the government is working with CNIB as they were a tenant of the previous building prior to the demolition of the building that was there. So the government is working with CNIB on a long-term permanent location for that very important community-based organization that offers a very important service to so many, not just in Regina, but in the surrounding area and across the province.
The CNIB tells CBC it is working with the government to find an accessible, affordable and safe space in Regina to deliver its programs. Last week, Brandt donated $2 million to the CNIB, which will be used for operations and programming. Higher interest rates are a worry to people renewing their mortgages. More than 1 million Canadian mortgages are up for renewal this year alone. That means many mortgage holders will end up paying more. Sophia Harris walks us through some options.
For Sajjad Sid, it's all about strategy. His mortgage is up for renewal in August, so when his bank offered him a new rate, he started searching for counter offers.
Definitely have to shop around, like at least go to 2 banks.
Sid got several offers and wound up renewing his mortgage with a different bank, getting a fixed rate close to 1% lower than his bank's best offer.
4.93% for 3 years. It's the best I can get right now because the rates have been going up.
The Bank of Canada has hiked its benchmark interest rate 10 times since March 2022. About 4 million mortgages will be up for renewal in the next 3 years, and homeowners renewing could see their monthly payments spike by hundreds of dollars.
We take calls from some people who are actually in tears. You know, they've got a renewal. They don't know what they're going to do.
This mortgage broker says lenders are now offering lower fixed-rate mortgages compared to variable rates, which can fluctuate. So he suggests going fixed for now.
We're at a high point now. Eventually it'll be lower. I can't predict when. I don't know when. But a 2 or 3 year fixed gives you the opportunity to look for better rates 2 or 3 years from now.
And if you just can't afford higher mortgage payments, one option is to extend the number of years you have to pay off your mortgage, which lowers your monthly bill. But experts warn you'll pay more in the long run.
It comes at a cost, and that could be, $100,000 or more of extra interest over the life of the mortgage, and maybe not paying off that mortgage until you're into your 70s or 80s.
Sid is extending the length of his mortgage to lower his payments, but he says it's just a short-term move to ride out higher rates. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
The smoke affected the Saskatchewan Roughriders' final preparations for tomorrow's battle against the Calgary Stampeders. As Alex mentioned earlier, they moved practice indoors as they get ready for a Stampeder club they defeated in Week 2 in Calgary. So, with a win, the Riders can take the season series from their Western rivals. The Green and White currently find themselves sitting in third place at 3-1. The combined total margin of victory over those 3 wins is a paltry 8 points. This hasn't left much wiggle room in how they play.
Veteran leadership. I think that's the key. We've got veterans on both sides of the ball where when it gets late, they don't panic, and they understand how the clock works. They understand situational football, and we work really hard on situational football. And we've made plays when we needed to. Now the focus is let's play better the whole game, so we don't have to, turn it on at the end. That's what
every team's going to play in tight games in this league, and maybe just some of ours are now. And it's a lot of times what makes or breaks a season is if teams can win those tight games, because I think it's something that's learned. I think it's a belief thing, and what we can take away is that we're not the team that we're going to be right now, not even close. But the fact that we're able to do that while we're really banged up and beat up, with a lot of projected starters out, the fact that we're able to kind of win those games even when we're not at full strength has really instilled a lot of belief in the guys in this locker room.
Kickoff is at 5 o'clock tomorrow night at Mosaic Stadium. Smoke could be a factor, but Ethan will have more on that coming up in his weather forecast after the break. Well, if you're planning to head outside this weekend, you might want to wear a mask to help mitigate the smoke. Besides bringing hazy skies, the smoke can cause physical impacts. Skin irritation, burning eyes, headaches. Sound familiar? So, how long are we stuck with this? We are back with Ethan after the break with the forecast. Stay with us. It's been one of the best-selling books in Canada for more than 2 years, but Michelle Good could not have anticipated how much writing Five Little Indians would change her life. The Saskatchewan Indigenous author has just released a new book of essays about Indigenous and Canadian history. It also includes her own lived experience. It's called Truth Telling.
Writing Five Little Indians was a very long process. It took me 9 years to finish writing the book. And when the book was accepted for publication, that was pretty wondrous. It was exciting. But now that it has catapulted basically through the stratosphere, it has been phenomenal because it's given me a platform to have so many conversations about that very important subject of the ongoing impacts of residential schools. So it's really changed my life significantly. This incredible response, I felt people are so willing. Non-Indigenous Canadians have become very willing to have this conversation. And so I thought, this is a moment, let's expand the conversation. We really wanted to look at the history of law and policy and how those things have impacted Indigenous relations in Canada. I wanted to look at the myth of Canadian history and how people have come to understand Canadian history and how in fact that is kind of an erroneous story. It isn't the story, it is the story we've been fed as it's kind of an odd source, but Anais Nin said this very interesting thing that I can never forget. When others asked the truth of me, I was convinced it was not the truth they wanted, but an illusion they could bear to live with. And that's the situation with Canadian history. It's a myth, and and people really need to understand Canadian history as experienced by Indigenous people through the lens of Indigenous experience. I felt it was extremely important to include my own experience as it pertains to 60 Scoop, because I feel that if people can understand things on a personal level, then they can extrapolate and they can think about it on the broader societal level and how that impacted a much larger cross-section of people. I chose to do a complete chapter on pretendianism because it is such a critical issue. And pretendianism is not just an individual issue. That in itself is bad enough, where you see people like Mary Ellen Chappelle Lafond, who have had, a 30-some plus lucrative career based on a false claim to indigeneity. You see Carrie Bourassa, who is the same thing. You see Joseph Boyden, the same thing, Michelle Latimer. But it's happening on a much larger scale as well, where entire groups of people are trying to establish themselves as a First Nation, as a Métis community. And what Jean Tellier referred to it as reverse assimilation, right? Where non-Indigenous people are overwhelming the Indigenous population by their pretendianism. So it's a very, very critical issue. When I wrote the book and I thought about, because when I write, I don't know if it's the same with other people, but when I write, I consider who am I writing to? And I wanted to write to every Canadian. I wanted to write to, teenagers could read this book and they could absorb it easily. So, I hope that everybody reads it. I hope that it is picked up, for Indigenous Studies courses, for history courses. That would be fantastic. But I also just really encourage, it's not a big book. It can be read in one day. And I just really hope that Canadians generally will pick it up, will read it, and really give some reconsideration to what they think they know about Canadian history.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital Ford Lincoln. Employee pricing is on now.
Our weather specialist Ethan Williams joins me now. I would like to remove my eyeballs and rinse them under cool water and put them back in my head. How long? Answer the question. How long?
Well, the good news is, as I mentioned earlier, we're starting to see those advisories dropping off now through parts of the province, and that includes in Saskatoon and Prince Albert, where, look at this. By tomorrow, this is the number on the right is the Air Quality Health Index rating for tomorrow. We'll probably be in the low to moderate rating in portions of central and northern Saskatchewan. For Regina, Swift Current, Estevan, southern Saskatchewan, we're probably still going to be in that moderate to high risk. But another thing that this smoke is doing is it is reducing visibility on highways as well. Swift Current, Kindersley, kind of around that 2 to 3 kilometer range. Nothing like we see in the winter where we're below, a kilometer of visibility. But just keep that in mind if you're heading out to the cottage or to any of the events this weekend. Again, strong winds from the northwest, the main culprit for bringing down all of this smoke. And still at this hour, gusting in the 50 kilometer an hour range in southern Saskatchewan. Also a couple of thunderstorms popping up. We did have a severe thunderstorm warning on this cell just south of Val-Marie, but it's moved into the States now. Some showers moving along the Trans-Canada east of Regina, but we're not expecting a whole lot more rain tonight in southern and central Saskatchewan. Really just pop-up showers here and there. This low, finally, going away, finally, at last. It's out of our hair as we head through the weekend. It will start to die off. Maybe a couple of millimeters in eastern sections of northern Saskatchewan as it begins to die off. But again, tomorrow, looking for clearing through much of the province. And that'll be the same on Sunday as a high pressure begins to move in. And this will clear things out and warm things up in northern Saskatchewan come next week. But before that system is out of there, we're still going to have a couple of gusty days here tonight and tomorrow. Gusts in the 50 to 60 range again in the south. And then finally heading into Sunday, that's when it looks like winds are going to start to diminish. So what does that mean for the smoke? That means that probably west central and southwestern Saskatchewan will be seeing the heaviest of it as we head in through tomorrow morning. And by tomorrow evening, again, really all of southern Saskatchewan seeing those plumes in place. But then you notice Sunday afternoon, the flow starts to shift. South winds are going to push that back into Alberta. Unfortunately, it'll be their problem again, but it'll be out of our hair. And as that surface low begins to weaken, so too does the upper level low. And that allows this ridge to be building in, coming eastward. And that is where we're going to be sitting under, bringing the warmer weather to northern Saskatchewan. But you notice the deeper colors here, the darker, warmer colors are not moving quite as north. So for a lot of us, we're actually going to be seeing temperatures staying where they are over the next few days here. Regina next week, still going to be breezy at times through midweek, but temperatures are going to begin to warm up toward the end of the week. Saskatoon, we thought maybe there'd be a little bit more rain for you folks. It is dry in a lot of portions of the province, but instead we're looking for clearing skies and temperatures are going to be warming up, but at least that smoke should be getting out of here, Sam.
All right. Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
Stay with us. We have more news after the break. In British Columbia, officials warn that drought conditions are now at their most extreme, with 2/3 of the province's water basins at critical lows. Mira Baines has more on what's being done.
The province is sounding the alarm about looming water scarcity.
The situation is severe. We need people to turn their minds to a conservation mindset now.
Emergency Management and Climate Readiness Minister Bowen Ma says more water restrictions may be put in place soon.
Water restrictions would come from local governments and First Nations, and we'll be speaking with all the mayors and chiefs and chairs this afternoon about the drought conditions that we're seeing and encouraging communities to escalate their water restrictions.
BC is still feeling the effects of drought from last fall. Conditions are dire as the province heads into the hottest, driest months of the year. BC uses a 6-level drought classification system to explain the severity and level of response to drought conditions. It ranges from 0 in light green, which is sufficient to meet socioeconomic and ecosystem needs, to level 5, shown in dark red. Dark red means a lack of water is having adverse impacts and will likely lead to water restrictions and regulatory action for businesses. This is what the province looks like now. Much of the province is already at level 4 and some parts at level 5, including Vancouver Island, northeastern BC, and Bulkley Lakes regions. On Vancouver Island, where drought concerns are the most severe, the Cowichan River levels are dropping. With so little water, there's concern about the fish. Most of BC has received rainfall over the past year between 40% and 85% of annual average precipitation. Rain could change the current trend.
It really is going to revolve around what will happen come September and October and whether we get the province-wide precipitation events such as things like atmospheric rivers. We do need big rainfall events.
The province is suggesting people restrict their own water use by taking shorter showers, watering their lawns less. So far, the BC Energy Regulator is requiring oil and gas operators to immediately suspend water diversions to the Peace and Liard River watersheds. Ma says a program is also in place to reimburse First Nations and local governments if they need to truck in water if the situation gets worse. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
And Ethan is back with one last look at weather or smoke.
Yeah, a lot of it tomorrow morning, I think, in Regina. Will still be quite hazy. Those northwest winds still blowing in that smoke. We're not going to warm up a whole lot. By the noon hour, probably still under 20 degrees and a bit hazy. The air quality health index, though, starting to drop as we head through the afternoon. That is good news. And by tomorrow morning in Saskatoon, can't rule out still being hazy as well, and then pretty much an identical forecast to Regina here. Again, those northwest gusts will be quite strong at times, kind of in the 40 to 50 range, I think is where we're going to be, and we're going to see that index drop for you as well. Now, if you're headed to the game tomorrow night in Regina, Riders versus Stamps, while temperature's not too bad, we're not expecting any rain. The air quality health index around a 4 out of 10, so hopefully that will reduce the smoke, but winds pretty gusty coming from the northwest there, so a bit of a challenging night to play football, Sam.
Well, let's hope that the Riders don't battle the wind and the Stampeders.
Yes, fingers crossed.
All right, thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
Before we leave you this week, come rain, wind, sunshine, or smoke, Country Thunder Music Festival is back in the Craven Valley. Here's how things looked from the air this afternoon. Tonight, country star John Party will take the main stage at 10:30. Tomorrow's big headliner is Tim McGraw. Organizers say they'll be announcing a big headliner for 2024. The festival wraps up on Sunday night with Keith Urban. And that is it for us this week. For News Anytime, you can always head to our website or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Ethan and I will be back with more local news at 11. Thanks for watching and have a great night.